Imagine waking up in a world where death lurks behind every shadow, where the very air you breathe could freeze your lungs, and where creatures the size of houses roam freely with nothing but hunger in their eyes. This was not a nightmare or a scene from a horror movie. This was reality for our ancestors 2 million years ago during the Pleistocene epoch, a period that paleontologists and historians often describe as hell on Earth. The world our early human ancestors inhabited was nothing like the comfortable planet we know today. Massive glaciers stretched across continents, locking away so much water that sea levels dropped by hundreds of feet. Temperatures plummeted to levels that would kill most modern humans within hours. But this frozen wasteland was just the beginning of their troubles. Picture massive saber-toothed cats with fangs longer than kitchen knives, stalking through forests of ice. Imagine cave bears standing 12 feet tall on their hind legs, with claws that could tear through flesh like paper. Giant wolves the size of modern ponies hunted in packs of 30 or more. Short-faced bears, the most terrifying predators ever to walk the earth, stood over 6 feet tall at the shoulder and could run faster than a racehorse. These were not the cuddly animals we see in zoos today. These were evolutionary killing machines, perfectly designed for one purpose: to hunt and devour anything that moved. And yet somehow our ancestors not only survived, but thrived in this hostile environment. They were not the strongest creatures on the planet. They were not the fastest or the largest. They did not have natural weapons like claws or fangs. They could not fly to escape danger or burrow underground to hide. By all logical measures, early humans should have been wiped out within a few generations. But they possessed something that no other creature had: an incredible capacity for intelligence, cooperation, and adaptation. These early humans were the first true warriors of our species, not because they sought war, but because every single day was a battle for survival. Every decision they made, every step they took, every breath they drew was a victory against impossible odds. Consider the daily challenges they faced. Finding food was not as simple as opening a refrigerator or visiting a grocery store. They had to track animals across frozen landscapes, sometimes for days, with nothing but crude stone tools and their wits. They had to identify which plants were safe to eat and which would kill them instantly. They had to locate fresh water sources in a world where most water was frozen solid for months at a time. Shelter was another constant struggle. There were no buildings, no heating systems, no warm clothes. They had to find or create protection from winds that could reach hurricane strength and temperatures that could drop 50 degrees below zero. They learned to use fire not just for warmth, but as a weapon against the darkness and the predators that ruled the night. Perhaps most remarkably, they had to do all of this while raising children and caring for the sick and elderly. Unlike other animals that abandon the weak, early humans developed complex social structures that protected the most vulnerable members of their groups. This was not just compassion, it was strategic survival. The elderly possessed knowledge that could mean the difference between life and death for the entire group. These first warriors developed technologies that seem primitive to us now, but were revolutionary for their time. They crafted spears that could penetrate the thick hides of mammoths. They created traps sophisticated enough to capture animals many times their size. They developed techniques for preserving meat that allowed them to survive lean periods that would have starved other creatures. But their greatest weapon was their ability to work together. While other predators competed with members of their own species, early humans learned to cooperate on an unprecedented scale. They shared information about hunting grounds, weather patterns, and dangerous areas. They developed the first forms of language, allowing them to pass down knowledge from generation to generation. This is the story of humanity's first warriors, the brave men and women who faced down extinction and emerged victorious. Their battlefield was the entire planet. Their enemy was nature itself, and their prize was nothing less than the survival of our species. Every human alive today owes their existence to these forgotten heroes who refused to surrender in the face of overwhelming odds. The morning sun cast long shadows across the African savanna as Koba crouched beside the riverbank, his weathered hands working methodically with a piece of volcanic rock. His fingers, scarred from countless attempts at tool-making, moved with practiced precision as he struck one stone against another. Each impact sent sharp flakes flying, slowly revealing the deadly edge hidden within the raw material. This was not just craftsmanship. This was the birth of humanity's first weapons, the tools that would transform defenseless primates into the planet's most formidable predators. 2.5 million years ago, our ancestors made a discovery that would change the course of evolution itself. They realized that rocks could be shaped, that stones could be sharpened, and that with enough skill and patience, these simple materials could become extensions of their own bodies. This moment marked the beginning of what archaeologists call the Oldowan tool tradition, named after the Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, where the first examples were discovered by Louis and Mary Leakey in the 1960s. But calling these implements simple tools understates their revolutionary nature. These were humanity's first weapons of war against a hostile world, and their creation required a level of cognitive sophistication that separated our ancestors from every other species on the planet. The process of making an Oldowan chopper was not random striking of stone against stone. It required understanding cause and effect, the ability to visualize the final product before beginning work, and the patience to complete a task that might take hours or even days. Consider the mental processes involved in creating even the most basic stone tool. The toolmaker had to select the right type of rock, understanding that different stones had different properties. Volcanic glass, or obsidian, could be flaked to create edges sharper than modern surgical scalpels, but it was brittle and broke easily. Flint was more durable but harder to work. Quartzite was abundant but required more skill to shape effectively. Each choice represented a complex decision based on availability, intended use, and the maker's own skill level. The actual process of knapping, as archaeologists call stone tool manufacture, required an understanding of physics that our ancestors could not have articulated, but certainly understood intuitively. They had to know exactly where to strike the core stone, at what angle, and with how much force. Too hard and the stone would shatter uselessly. Too soft and nothing would happen. The angle had to be precise, typically between 90 and 120 degrees, to achieve the controlled fracture that would remove a sharp flake. Archaeological evidence suggests that learning to make stone tools was a lengthy process that began in childhood and continued throughout an individual's lifetime. Sites across Africa contain what researchers call teaching stones, cores that show evidence of repeated unsuccessful attempts at flaking, suggesting that experienced toolmakers were passing their knowledge to younger members of the group. This transfer of technical knowledge represented one of humanity's first educational systems, a structured way of preserving and transmitting crucial survival information. The tools themselves evolved rapidly as our ancestors experimented with different techniques and designs. The earliest choppers were crude implements, barely recognizable as intentionally made objects to untrained eyes. But within a few 100,000 years, toolmakers were creating hand axes with symmetrical designs that required hundreds of carefully planned strikes to complete. These hand axes, some of which measure over a foot in length, represent some of the most sophisticated stone tools ever created by early humans. The multi-purpose nature of these early tools cannot be overstated. A single hand axe could serve as a knife for butchering meat, a scraper for cleaning hides, a digging implement for finding roots and tubers, and a weapon for defense against predators or competitors. The versatility of these tools allowed our ancestors to exploit food sources that were previously inaccessible and to process materials in ways that no other species could match. But stone tools were just the beginning of humanity's technological revolution. As our ancestors spread across Africa and eventually into Asia and Europe, they encountered new challenges that required new solutions. The discovery of wooden spears at sites like Schoningen in Germany, dating back over 400,000 years, reveals that early humans were creating composite weapons that combined different materials to achieve greater effectiveness. These wooden spears were not simple sharpened sticks. They were carefully crafted weapons that required sophisticated understanding of wood properties, seasoning techniques, and aerodynamics. The Schoningen spears were made from spruce wood, chosen for its combination of strength and flexibility. The points were fire-hardened, a process that involved carefully controlled heating to drive out moisture and increase density without burning the wood. The balance point of each spear was precisely calculated to ensure accurate flight over distances of up to 30 meters. The development of fire control represents perhaps the most crucial technological breakthrough in human history. While other animals occasionally use naturally occurring fires for various purposes, Only humans learned to create, maintain, and control fire at will. This mastery of fire transformed our ancestors from creatures who feared the darkness into the rulers of both day and night. Archaeological evidence for controlled use of fire dates back at least 790,000 years, with possible evidence extending back over 1 million years. Sites like Qesem Cave in Israel show clear evidence of hearths that were maintained for extended periods, with carefully constructed fire pits surrounded by stones to contain the flames and direct the heat efficiently. These were not accidental fires or opportunistic use of natural blazes. These were engineered systems designed to maximize the benefits of combustion while minimizing the risks. The applications of fire were revolutionary in their scope and impact. Cooking food not only made it safer to eat by killing dangerous bacteria and parasites, but it also made nutrients more bioavailable and easier to digest. This improvement in nutrition is believed by many researchers to have been crucial in supporting the brain growth that distinguished later human species from their predecessors. The energy savings from eating cooked food meant that less energy had to be devoted to digestion, freeing up resources for brain development and other activities. Fire also served as a powerful weapon against the predators that had terrorized our ancestors for millions of years. No animal willingly approaches an open flame, and the ability to create and maintain fire gave early humans a means of establishing safe zones wherever they went. Campsites surrounded by fires became impregnable fortresses against even the largest and most dangerous predators. The social implications of fire control were equally transformative. Gathering around fires extended the useful hours of each day, allowing for social interaction, tool manufacture, and food preparation to continue long after sunset. These extended social periods likely contributed to the development of language, as groups had more time for communication and storytelling. The warmth of fires also made it possible for humans to survive in colder climates, enabling the eventual migration out of Africa into temperate and even Arctic regions. The techniques for making fire varied depending on available materials and local conditions. The most common methods involved either friction or percussion. Friction fires were created by rapidly rubbing two pieces of wood together until the friction generated enough heat to ignite tinder. This technique required specific types of wood, proper preparation of materials, and considerable skill and endurance. Archaeological sites contain fire-making kits with carefully prepared tinder bundles made from dried grass, bark fibers, and other flammable materials. Percussion firemaking involves striking stones together to create sparks that could ignite prepared tinder. This method required specific types of stone, particularly iron-rich rocks that would produce sparks when struck against flint or other hard stones. The tinder had to be prepared carefully, often involving the processing of materials like charred cloth or fungus that would catch and hold a spark long enough for flames to develop. The mastery of firemaking represented a quantum leap in human technological capability. Unlike toolmaking, which required only skill and materials, firemaking required understanding of complex chemical processes, careful preparation of materials, and the ability to maintain and control the fire once it was started. Groups that mastered these techniques gained enormous advantages over those that did not, and the knowledge quickly spread throughout human populations. As human populations grew and spread, the demand for tools and weapons increased dramatically. This led to the development of specialized tool-making sites, locations where groups would gather to exploit high-quality stone sources and manufacture large quantities of implements. Sites like the Galt site in Texas and Boxgrove in England show evidence of intensive tool production, with thousands of artifacts and tons of manufacturing debris indicating that these locations served as prehistoric factories. The social organization required for these specialized production sites represents another leap in human development. Successful tool manufacture required not only skilled craftsmen, but also systems for acquiring raw materials, organizing work, and distributing finished products. These activities required planning, cooperation, and probably some form of early trade or exchange systems. Evidence for long-distance transport of stone tools and raw materials appears very early in the archaeological record. Tools made from stone sources hundreds of kilometers from where they were found suggest that early human groups were either traveling great distances to acquire materials or engaging in trade networks that spanned vast territories. Either explanation indicates a level of social organization and forward planning that was unprecedented in the animal kingdom. The standardization of tool designs across large geographic areas provides additional evidence for sophisticated social systems. When archaeologists find nearly identical hand axe designs at sites separated by thousands of kilometers and hundreds of thousands of years, it suggests that tool-making knowledge was being preserved and transmitted with remarkable fidelity. This cultural continuity required not just individual skill, but community-wide commitment to maintaining technological traditions. The development of hafting technology, the attachment of stone implements to wooden handles, represented another major breakthrough in weapon effectiveness. Hafted tools multiplied the force that could be applied through leverage, making it possible to work with much greater efficiency and precision. A hafted axe could cut through wood and bone with far less effort than a handheld implement, while hafted spears could be thrown with greater accuracy and penetrating power. The construction of hafted implements required sophisticated understanding of materials science and engineering principles. The adhesives used to attach stone points to wooden shafts had to be strong enough to withstand tremendous forces while remaining flexible enough to absorb shock. Early humans experimented with various organic adhesives, including tree resins, animal-based glues, and birch bark tar, each requiring different preparation techniques and application methods. Birch bark tar, used extensively in European sites, required a complex production process that involved heating birch bark in the absence of oxygen to produce a sticky, waterproof adhesive. This process, known as destructive distillation, required sophisticated understanding of combustion chemistry and precise temperature control. The fact that early humans mastered this technique over 200,000 years ago demonstrates cognitive capabilities that rival those of modern humans. The binding materials used in hafting also required careful selection and preparation. Sinew from animals provided strong, flexible cordage that could be wrapped tightly around the joint between stone and wood. Plant fibers were processed into strong threads and ropes using techniques that required detailed knowledge of plant properties and processing methods. Leather strips were prepared using complex tanning processes that made animal hides flexible and durable. As weapon technology advanced, early humans began to experiment with projectile systems that could deliver deadly force at greater distances. The development of spear throwers, known to archaeologists as atlatls, represented a major breakthrough in hunting technology. These devices use leverage to increase the velocity and range of thrown spears, effectively extending the reach and power of human hunters. Archaeological evidence for atlatl use dates back at least 30,000 years, though the devices themselves rarely survive due to their organic construction. The stone points associated with atlatl darts are distinctively different from hand-thrown spear points, being smaller and lighter while maintaining the necessary penetrating power. Sites in Europe and Australia contain cave paintings depicting hunters using these devices, providing visual confirmation of their widespread adoption. The physics of atlatl operation required sophisticated understanding of leverage, momentum, and projectile dynamics. The device effectively added length to the thrower's arm, increasing the radius of the throwing arc and therefore the velocity of the projectile. Skilled atlatl users could achieve ranges of over 100 meters with accuracy sufficient for hunting large game. This technology gave human hunters a significant advantage over prey animals and competing predators. The social implications of advanced projectile technology were profound. Successful hunting with atlatls required not just individual skill, but coordinated group action. Hunters had to work together to position themselves effectively, coordinate their attacks, and retrieve their weapons after use. The complexity of these hunting operations required communication systems, leadership structures, and shared strategies that went far beyond anything seen in other species. The manufacture of composite projectiles also required specialized knowledge and division of labor. Creating an effective atlatl dart involved expertise in stone knapping for the point, woodworking for the shaft, adhesive preparation for attachment, and fletching with feathers or other materials to stabilize flight. No single individual could master all these skills to the highest level, necessitating cooperation and specialization within groups. Training with these weapons required extended practice and instruction. Archaeological sites contain what appear to be practice areas where young hunters learn to use spear throwers, with concentrations of damaged or discarded projectile points, suggesting repeated use for target practice. The investment in training time indicates that groups recognize the long-term value of developing skilled hunters and were willing to support individuals during the learning process. The development of trapping technology represented another major advance in human hunting capability. Rather than relying solely on direct confrontation with prey animals, early humans learned to construct devices that could capture or kill animals without human presence. This technology multiplied hunting efficiency by allowing a single individual to potentially capture multiple animals simultaneously. Archaeological evidence for early trapping is scarce due to the organic nature of most trap construction materials, but ethnographic studies of modern hunter-gatherer societies provide insights into the sophisticated trapping systems that were likely used by early humans. Pitfall traps, snares, deadfalls, and fish weirs all require detailed understanding of animal behavior, materials science, and engineering principles. The construction of effective traps required careful observation of animal movement patterns, feeding habits, and behavioral responses to various stimuli. Trap builders had to understand which materials would be strong enough to hold struggling animals, how to disguise traps so they would not be detected, and how to position traps in locations where animals were likely to encounter them. This knowledge base represented a form of applied animal psychology that was remarkably sophisticated. Pitfall traps, used for capturing large game, required enormous investments of time and labor. These traps involved excavating deep pits, often several meters deep and wide enough to prevent escape by large animals. The pits had to be camouflaged with branches, leaves, and other materials to appear as solid ground. Stakes were sometimes placed at the bottom to ensure that trapped animals could not escape. The construction of a single pitfall trap might require several days of work by multiple individuals. The maintenance of trap systems also required ongoing investment of time and resources. Traps had to be checked regularly to retrieve captured animals and to repair damage caused by weather or failed captures. The camouflage materials had to be refreshed periodically to maintain effectiveness. Failed traps had to be rebuilt or relocated based on observed animal behavior patterns. Snares and deadfalls required different but equally sophisticated knowledge. These devices used stored mechanical energy to capture or kill animals when triggered by the animal's own movements. The construction of effective snares required understanding of knot tying techniques, cordage strength, and animal anatomy. Deadfalls used gravity and leverage to deliver fatal blows, requiring precise engineering to ensure that the mechanism would function reliably when triggered. The psychological warfare aspects of early human weapons deserve special attention. Beyond their direct physical effects, many early weapons served to intimidate competitors and establish dominance within and between groups. The display of finely crafted weapons and the demonstration of weapon-making skills likely played important roles in social hierarchies and mate selection. Archaeological sites contain examples of weapons that appear to have been made for display rather than practical use. These ceremonial or prestige items were often made from exotic materials, required extraordinary skill to produce, and show little evidence of actual use. The investment of time and resources in creating these items suggests that weapon making had symbolic and social significance beyond mere survival utility. The standardization of weapon designs within groups and the distinctiveness of styles between groups suggest that weapons served as markers of group identity. Just as modern military units have distinctive uniforms and equipment, early human groups may have used weapon styles to identify members and distinguish themselves from competitors. This cultural marking function would have been crucial in the complex social negotiations required for successful cooperation and conflict resolution. The training required to become proficient with early weapons was extensive and began in childhood. Archaeological sites contain miniature versions of adult weapons, suggesting that children learned weapon making and weapon use skills through play and structured instruction. The investment in training indicates that groups recognize the importance of developing skilled warriors and were willing to support long-term educational processes. The psychological impact of weapons on their users was also significant. The possession of effective weapons likely increased confidence, reduced anxiety, and enabled more aggressive behavior when necessary. The transformation of early humans from prey animals to apex predators required not just technological advancement, but psychological adaptation to their new role in the ecosystem. The development of defensive weapons and armor represents another important aspect of early human weapon technology. While offensive weapons received more attention in archaeological research, defensive technologies were equally important for survival. Evidence for shields, protective clothing, and fortified shelters appears relatively late in the archaeological record, but these technologies were probably developed much earlier, using organic materials that did not preserve well. The concept of armor required understanding of the physics of impact and penetration. Early humans had to identify materials that could absorb or deflect the force of weapons while remaining light enough to wear and flexible enough to allow movement. Animal hides were probably the earliest armor materials, providing protection against claws, teeth in stone weapons while remaining relatively practical for everyday use. The social organization required for effective use of weapons in group conflicts was complex and sophisticated. Successful warfare required leadership, communication, coordination, and shared strategies that went far beyond individual combat skills. Archaeological evidence for early warfare is controversial, but sites like Jebel Sahaba in Sudan show clear evidence of systematic violence between groups dating back over 13,000 years. The logistics of weapon manufacture and maintenance for group conflicts were enormous. A single battle might result in the loss or damage of dozens of weapons, requiring rapid replacement to maintain group effectiveness. This demand necessitated not just skilled weapon makers, but systems for storing raw materials, organizing production, and distributing finished weapons to fighters. The evolution of weapon technology accelerated dramatically with the development of composite materials and complex manufacturing processes. By the end of the Paleolithic period, human weapon makers were creating implements that rivaled modern tools in their sophistication and effectiveness. Composite bows made from multiple materials, multi-barbed harpoons for fishing, and specialized tools for working different materials all demonstrate the remarkable technological achievements of our ancestors. The bow and arrow system, which appeared relatively late in human history, represents perhaps the pinnacle of prehistoric weapon technology. The construction of an effective bow required understanding of wood properties, tension and compression forces, and aerodynamics. Different parts of the bow were often made from different materials to optimize performance, with the back under tension made from materials strong in tension, while the belly under compression used materials strong in compression. Arrow construction was equally sophisticated, requiring precise matching of point weight, shaft stiffness, and fletching design to achieve optimal flight characteristics. The concept of arrow spine, the stiffness of the arrow shaft, had to be matched to the power of the bow to prevent the arrow from breaking or flying erratically. This matching process required empirical testing and adjustment that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of projectile dynamics. The social implications of bow technology were revolutionary. Unlike earlier weapons that required close-range combat or group hunting strategies, bows allowed individual hunters to take large game alone from safe distances. This capability reduced the dependency on group cooperation for survival, while simultaneously requiring more sophisticated individual skills and equipment. The training required for bow proficiency was extensive and highly specialized. Modern experimental archaeology has shown that achieving hunting-level accuracy with traditional bows requires years of regular practice. The muscle memory, strength, and coordination needed for effective archery had to be developed over long periods, representing a significant investment in specialized education. The manufacturing knowledge required for bow and arrow systems was also highly specialized and required master-apprentice relationships for effective transmission. The selection of proper materials, the seasoning and preparation processes, the assembly techniques, and the testing and adjustment procedures all required detailed knowledge that could only be acquired through extensive training and experience. As we examine the development of humanity's first weapons, we see not just technological progress, but the emergence of the cognitive and social capabilities that would eventually lead to civilization itself. The patient accumulation of knowledge, the systematic transmission of skills, the cooperation required for complex projects, and the strategic thinking needed for effective weapon use all contributed to the development of human culture and society. These early weapons were more than tools for survival. They were the foundation upon which human dominance of the planet was built. Every subsequent technological achievement, from agriculture to space exploration, built upon the cognitive and social capabilities first developed in the creation and use of humanity's first weapons. In learning to shape stone into tools and to control fire for their purposes, our ancestors took the first steps on the long journey that would eventually lead to the modern world. The sun had barely risen over the vast expanse of the African savanna when Akono felt the familiar rumble beneath her feet. The mammoth herd was on the move again, their massive forms creating clouds of dust that could be seen for kilometers across the grassland. For her small band of hunters, this was not just another day of tracking game. This was the culmination of weeks of preparation, observation, and strategic planning that would determine whether her people would feast for months or face the specter of starvation. Akono and her fellow hunters represented the pinnacle of Paleolithic survival expertise. They were not merely scavengers hoping to find the remains of kills made by larger predators. They were sophisticated strategists who had developed hunting techniques so effective that they could take down animals 10 times their size using nothing but coordinated teamwork, carefully crafted weapons, and an intimate understanding of animal behavior that bordered on the supernatural. The mammoth hunt was perhaps the most spectacular example of early human tactical brilliance, but it was just one component of a comprehensive survival system that had evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. Our ancestors had developed strategies for finding food, water, and shelter in environments that would challenge even modern survivalists equipped with advanced technology. They had learned to read the subtle signs of nature, to predict weather patterns, and to exploit seasonal cycles with a precision that ensured their survival through the harshest conditions Earth had ever experienced. The planning phase of a mammoth hunt began long before any hunter picked up a spear. Scouts would track the herds for days or even weeks, learning their movement patterns, identifying the strongest and weakest individuals, and noting the terrain features that could be exploited during the actual hunt. This reconnaissance required extraordinary patience and skill, as the scouts had to remain undetected while gathering crucial intelligence about animals whose senses were far more acute than their own. The intelligence gathered during these scouting missions was shared through sophisticated communication systems that combined spoken language, hand signals, and ground markings. Hunters developed detailed mental maps of vast territories, memorizing the locations of water sources, seasonal feeding areas, migration routes, and terrain features that could be used to their advantage. This information was passed down through generations, creating a body of ecological knowledge that was more comprehensive than anything possessed by modern urban dwellers. The selection of hunting locations required understanding of mammoth psychology and behavior that could only have been acquired through generations of careful observation. Mammoths were not just large animals to be attacked randomly. They were intelligent creatures with complex social structures, protective instincts, and defensive capabilities that could easily kill careless hunters. Successful mammoth hunters had to understand herd dynamics, predict how individuals would react to threats, and identify the circumstances under which these powerful animals could be safely approached. The preferred hunting locations were natural funnels or dead ends where mammoths could be driven and their escape routes limited. Cliff tops, narrow valleys, boggy areas, and riverbanks all provided opportunities for hunters to use terrain to their advantage. The most sophisticated hunting sites were modified by human activity, with hunters digging pits, building barriers, and creating artificial choke points that would channel mammoth movements in predetermined directions. Archaeological evidence from sites like Ambrona and Torralba in Spain reveals the incredible sophistication of these hunting operations. The bone beds at these locations contain the remains of dozens of mammoths and other large animals, arranged in patterns that suggest systematic butchering and processing. Stone tools are scattered throughout these sites in configurations that indicate planned activities rather than random scavenging. The scale of these operations required coordination among large numbers of hunters and support personnel. The actual hunt began long before the hunters came into contact with their prey. Fire was used strategically to influence mammoth movements, with hunters setting grass fires upwind of the herds to create smoke barriers that would drive the animals toward prepared hunting grounds. These fires had to be carefully controlled to avoid endangering the hunters themselves while creating the desired effect on the mammoth herds. The timing of fire setting required understanding of wind patterns, fuel loads, and fire behavior that represented a form of applied pyrotechnology. The drive phase of the hunt required precise coordination among team members, positioned across kilometers of terrain. Hunters would emerge from concealment at predetermined signals, using noise, movement, and fire to panic the mammoths into fleeing toward the prepared killing ground. This phase was extremely dangerous, as frightened mammoths could easily trample hunters who positioned themselves incorrectly or failed to execute their assigned roles properly. The weapons used in mammoth hunting were specifically designed for penetrating the thick hide and reaching vital organs of these massive animals. Spear points had to be large enough to create fatal wounds, while remaining sharp enough to penetrate mammoth skin, which could be several centimeters thick. The hafting of these weapons had to be strong enough to withstand the tremendous forces involved in mammoth hunting, yet designed to break away if a wounded mammoth fled with the spear still embedded in its body. The killing phase of a mammoth hunt required courage that bordered on the suicidal. Hunters had to approach wounded animals that weighed several tons and possessed tusks capable of impaling multiple attackers simultaneously. The final killing blows were typically delivered to specific anatomical targets that hunters had identified through extensive study of mammoth anatomy. Knowledge of mammoth physiology was passed down through generations of hunters, creating a detailed understanding of vulnerable points that could be exploited for quick, efficient kills. The butchering of a mammoth was as complex and demanding as the hunt itself. These animals had to be processed quickly before the meat spoiled, requiring organized teams of workers with specialized skills and tools. Different parts of the carcass required different processing techniques, with some portions prepared for immediate consumption, while others were preserved for future use. The scale of the butchering operation required advanced preparation of processing sites, preservation materials, and transportation systems. Mammoth hunting was seasonal, with most kills occurring during specific times of year when the animals were in optimal condition and weather favored preservation of the meat. Hunters had to coordinate their activities with these seasonal cycles, planning their hunts months in advance and preparing the resources needed for processing and storage. This long-term planning required sophisticated understanding of seasonal patterns and the ability to organize complex logistical operations. The social organization required for mammoth hunting was unprecedented in the animal kingdom. Successful hunts required leadership structures, role specialization, resource sharing, and conflict resolution mechanisms that could coordinate the activities of dozens or even hundreds of individuals. The leaders of these hunting expeditions had to possess not only hunting skills, but also the social and political abilities needed to maintain group cohesion under extremely stressful conditions. But mammoth hunting, spectacular though it was, represented only one component of early human survival strategies. Plant foods provided the bulk of calories for most hunter-gatherer groups, and the gathering of these resources required knowledge and skills that were no less sophisticated than those used in hunting. The identification, collection, and processing of edible plants required botanical knowledge that encompassed hundreds of species across multiple ecological zones. The seasonal timing of plant collection was crucial, as many edible species were only available during specific times of year or required processing at particular stages of their growth cycles. Root vegetables had to be collected when their nutrient content was highest, typically just before the plants began their reproductive phase. Fruits and nuts were gathered at peak ripeness, requiring careful monitoring of multiple species across large territories. Seeds were collected using specialized techniques that maximize yield while ensuring regeneration of the resource base. The processing of plant foods often required complex preparation techniques that transformed inedible or marginally nutritious materials into valuable food sources. Acorns, a staple food for many hunter-gatherer groups, contained high levels of toxic tannins that had to be removed through elaborate leaching processes. Nuts and seeds were often ground into flour using stone mortars and pestles, creating concentrated portable food sources that could be stored for extended periods. The tools used for plant gathering were specialized implements designed for specific harvesting techniques. Digging sticks were weighted and sharpened to penetrate hard soils and extract deep roots. Beaters were used to knock seeds from grasses and other plants. Baskets and containers were woven from plant materials using techniques that created waterproof, durable storage systems. Each tool represented specialized knowledge of materials and manufacturing techniques that required years to master. The knowledge required for successful plant gathering encompassed not only identification and processing techniques, but also understanding of ecological relationships that determined where and when different species would be available. Gatherers had to understand the effects of rainfall, temperature, soil conditions, and competition from other species on the plants they sought. This ecological knowledge was often more complex than that required for hunting, as plant communities contained hundreds of interacting species with complex relationships. Water procurement was another critical survival skill that required sophisticated knowledge and techniques. In many environments, surface water was not reliably available, forcing hunter-gatherer groups to develop methods for finding and extracting water from hidden sources. The ability to locate underground water using surface indicators was a specialized skill that could mean the difference between life and death in arid regions. The indicators used to locate water sources included vegetation patterns, animal tracks, topographical features, and even subtle changes in soil color and texture. Experienced waterfinders could detect underground streams by observing the flight patterns of birds, the distribution of certain plant species, and microscopic changes in surface conditions that were invisible to untrained observers. This knowledge required years of experience and was closely guarded by those who possessed it. The extraction of water from underground sources required engineering skills and specialized tools. Wells were dug using wooden and stone implements, with the excavation carefully planned to avoid cave-ins and to reach water-bearing layers. These wells often required stone lining to prevent contamination and collapse, representing significant investments of time and materials. The construction techniques used in well building were sophisticated enough to create water sources that remained functional for decades. Water storage and transportation presented additional challenges that required innovative solutions. In regions where water sources were widely scattered, hunter-gatherer groups developed portable storage systems that could transport large quantities of water across long distances. Animal stomachs and specially prepared hides were converted into water containers that were both lightweight and durable. These containers had to be treated with various organic compounds to prevent leakage and contamination. The purification of questionable water sources required knowledge of natural filtration and treatment methods. Sand and charcoal filters were constructed to remove particles and some contaminants. Boiling was used when fuel was available, and the risk of contamination was high. Certain plants were known to have water-purifying properties and were used to treat water from suspect sources. These techniques represented a sophisticated understanding of water chemistry and contamination that was acquired through trial and error over many generations. Shelter construction was another area where early humans developed remarkably sophisticated techniques adapted to local conditions and available materials. The popular image of cavemen living exclusively in natural caves is misleading, as archaeological evidence shows that our ancestors were capable of constructing elaborate shelters using a variety of materials and techniques. These structures had to provide protection from weather, predators, and other environmental hazards while remaining portable enough to be abandoned when groups moved to new territories. The simplest shelters were temporary windbreaks constructed from branches, hides, and other readily available materials. These structures could be erected quickly by small groups and provided basic protection from wind and rain. Despite their apparent simplicity, effective windbreaks required understanding of aerodynamics, structural engineering, and material science. The positioning, anchoring, and reinforcement of these shelters had to account for local wind patterns and weather conditions. More permanent shelters required sophisticated construction techniques and significant investments of time and materials. Archaeological sites in Europe contain evidence of structures that required hundreds of mammoth bones arranged in specific patterns to create frameworks for hide-covered dwellings. These mammoth bone houses represented some of the most complex construction projects undertaken by Paleolithic peoples, requiring engineering skills that were not surpassed until the development of agriculture. The construction of these elaborate shelters required advanced planning, resource gathering, and coordinated labor that could involve entire communities. The mammoth bones had to be transported from kill sites, often over considerable distances. The hides used for covering had to be specially prepared to provide weather resistance and durability. The assembly process required understanding of structural principles that ensured the finished buildings could withstand severe weather conditions. The interior organization of shelters reflected sophisticated understanding of space utilization and domestic activities. Hearths were positioned to provide maximum heating efficiency while minimizing smoke accumulation. Storage areas were designed to protect food and materials from moisture and pests. Sleeping areas were elevated and insulated to provide comfort and warmth. Work areas were positioned to take advantage of natural lighting and ventilation. The heating systems used in Paleolithic shelters were marvels of thermal engineering that maximized fuel efficiency while providing comfortable living conditions. Central hearths were surrounded by stone arrangements that absorbed and radiated heat long after fires died down. Smoke holes and ventilation systems were carefully designed to prevent carbon monoxide accumulation while retaining heat. Fuel storage areas were positioned for convenient access while preventing accidental ignition. Food preservation and storage represented another critical component of survival strategies that required extensive knowledge and specialized techniques. In environments where food availability was seasonal or unpredictable, the ability to preserve surplus resources for future use could determine group survival during lean periods. The preservation techniques developed by early humans were sophisticated enough to maintain food quality for months or even years. Drying was the most common preservation method, used for both meat and plant foods. The construction of drying racks and smokehouse structures required understanding of airflow, humidity control, and protection from insects and scavengers. Different foods required different drying techniques, with some items dried in direct sunlight, while others were processed in shaded, well-ventilated areas. The timing of drying operations had to be coordinated with weather conditions to ensure successful preservation. Smoking was used to preserve meat and fish, while adding flavor and pest resistance. The construction of smoking facilities required knowledge of combustion chemistry, as different types of wood produced different flavors and preservative effects. Temperature control was critical, as excessive heat would cook the food rather than preserving it, while insufficient heat would fail to achieve the desired preservation. The duration of smoking had to be carefully controlled based on the size and type of food being processed. Salt preservation, where salt was available, required knowledge of salt sources and extraction techniques. Coastal groups developed methods for extracting salt from seawater through evaporation processes that concentrated the mineral content. Inland groups located natural salt deposits and developed mining techniques for extracting pure salt. The application of salt for preservation required understanding of the chemical processes involved and the proper ratios needed for different types of food. Fermentation was used to preserve certain foods while enhancing their nutritional value. The controlled decomposition processes used in fermentation required understanding of the microorganisms involved and the environmental conditions that promoted beneficial fermentation while preventing harmful spoilage. Different foods required different fermentation techniques, with some processed in sealed containers, while others were fermented in open systems. Cold storage was used in regions where low temperatures were available for extended periods. Underground pits and ice caves were used to create natural refrigeration systems that could preserve food for months. The construction of these storage systems required understanding of thermodynamics and insulation techniques. The food stored in these systems had to be prepared and packaged in ways that prevented contamination and spoilage. The transportation of preserved foods required specialized containers and carrying systems that protected the food during movement while distributing weight efficiently among group members. Portable storage containers were constructed from animal hides, plant materials, and wooden components using techniques that created lightweight, durable, and weather-resistant storage systems. These containers had to be designed for easy loading and unloading while preventing damage to their contents. Clothing and personal equipment represented another area where early humans developed sophisticated technologies adapted to environmental conditions and survival needs. The clothing worn by Paleolithic peoples was not simply animal hides thrown over the body, but carefully designed garments that provided maximum protection and utility while remaining practical for active lifestyles. The preparation of hides for clothing required complex tanning processes that transformed raw animal skins into flexible, durable, and weather-resistant materials. Different tanning techniques were used for different applications, with some processes producing soft, flexible leather, suitable for close-fitting garments, while others created tough, water-resistant materials for outer clothing. The tanning process required specialized tools, chemical agents derived from plants or animal organs, and considerable time and labor. The cutting and sewing of leather garments required understanding of pattern making, material properties, and construction techniques that created functional, well-fitting clothing. The needles used for sewing were crafted from bone, antler, or other hard materials, and required considerable skill to manufacture. Thread was created from animal sinew, plant fibers, or other organic materials using twisting and strengthening techniques that produced strong, durable cordage. The design of Paleolithic clothing reflected sophisticated understanding of human physiology, weather protection, and activity requirements. Layered clothing systems provided adjustable insulation that could be modified for different activity levels and weather conditions. Specialized garments were designed for specific activities, with hunting clothing optimized for stealth and mobility, while cold weather gear prioritized insulation and weather protection. Footwear represented a particularly important component of personal equipment, as foot injuries could be fatal for people whose survival depended on mobility. Early footwear was constructed from multiple materials using techniques that provided protection while maintaining flexibility and traction. The soles were often reinforced with thick leather or other durable materials, while the uppers were designed for comfort and weather protection. Personal ornaments and decorative items, while not directly related to survival, played important roles in social organization and individual identity. The creation of jewelry, body ornaments, and decorative clothing required specialized skills and materials that were often traded over long distances. These items served as markers of individual status, group affiliation, and personal achievement within hunter-gatherer societies. The maintenance and repair of clothing and equipment required ongoing attention and specialized skills. Paleolithic peoples developed techniques for patching, reinforcing, and reconditioning their possessions to extend their useful life. The tools and materials needed for maintenance were carefully preserved and transported as part of each group's essential equipment. The knowledge required for effective maintenance was passed down through generations as part of the survival skills essential for group success. Seasonal migration patterns represented another critical component of survival strategies that required sophisticated planning and coordination. Most hunter-gatherer groups followed annual migration cycles that took advantage of seasonal resource availability while avoiding the worst environmental conditions. These migrations required detailed knowledge of territories covering hundreds or thousands of square kilometers and careful timing to arrive at resource areas when conditions were optimal. The planning of migration routes required understanding of terrain, weather patterns, resource availability, and potential hazards across vast territories. Routes had to be selected to provide access to water, food, and shelter while avoiding dangerous areas and potential conflicts with other groups. Alternative routes had to be identified to account for unexpected conditions or resource failures. The knowledge required for successful migration planning was accumulated over generations and represented one of the most valuable assets possessed by hunter-gatherer groups. The logistics of group migration required careful organization of personnel, equipment, and resources to ensure that all group members could complete the journey successfully. Loads had to be distributed among group members according to their capabilities and specialized roles. Essential equipment had to be prioritized while non-essential items were cached or abandoned. The pace of travel had to be adjusted to accommodate the slowest group members while ensuring that destinations were reached when resources were available. The social organization required for successful migration was complex and required strong leadership and group cooperation. Decisions about routes, timing, and resource allocation had to be made collectively while maintaining group unity and morale. Conflicts had to be resolved quickly to prevent them from undermining group effectiveness. The roles and responsibilities of group members had to be clearly defined and coordinated to ensure that all necessary tasks were completed. The survival strategies developed by early humans represented the culmination of hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary adaptation and cultural innovation. These techniques enabled our ancestors to survive and thrive in environments that would challenge even modern survival experts equipped with advanced technology. The knowledge and skills required for Paleolithic survival were far more complex and sophisticated than commonly imagined. representing intellectual achievements that rival those of any subsequent period in human history. The legacy of these survival strategies extends far beyond their immediate practical applications. The cognitive abilities, social organization, and technological innovation required for Paleolithic survival laid the foundation for all subsequent human cultural and technological development. The problem-solving skills, planning capabilities, and cooperative behaviors that enabled our ancestors to survive the challenges of the Pleistocene epoch became the intellectual and social foundation upon which human civilization was built. The first scream echoed across the moonlit savanna like the cry of a dying god. Zara pressed herself against the cold stone of the cave entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched the massive shape of a cave bear rear up on its hind legs just 20 meters away. Behind her, she could hear the shallow breathing of her newborn son and the labored gasps of her injured husband. There was nowhere to run, no weapons within reach, and no help coming. In this moment, facing certain death, something extraordinary happened. Instead of cowering in terror, Zara felt a cold fury rise within her chest. She would not watch her family die. She would not surrender to the darkness. In that instant, the warrior spirit that had carried humanity through 2 million years of hell on earth blazed to life once again. This moment, replayed countless times across millennia, represents the psychological transformation that separated early humans from every other species on the planet. It was not superior strength, speed, or natural weapons that made our ancestors the ultimate survivors. It was something far more powerful and mysterious, the emergence of a psychological profile that combined courage, determination, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat, even when facing impossible odds. The warrior spirit of early humans was not born from aggression or violence for its own sake. It emerged from the grinding reality of daily existence in a world where every sunrise brought new challenges that could end in death. Unlike modern humans, who can go days or weeks without facing life-threatening situations, our Paleolithic ancestors encountered potentially fatal decisions multiple times each day. Should they risk crossing a river where crocodiles lurked? Should they approach a carcass that might be guarded by predators? Should they venture into unexplored territory in search of food? Each choice required the kind of courage that modern people rarely need to summon. The psychological pressure of constant mortal danger created a selection process that favored individuals with specific mental characteristics. Those who froze in fear when confronted with threats did not survive to pass on their genes. Those who fled from every danger found themselves without resources and died of starvation. Those who acted recklessly were killed quickly by the consequences of poor decisions. But those who could assess danger accurately, act decisively under pressure, and maintain their determination in the face of overwhelming odds not only survived but thrived. Archaeological evidence suggests that this psychological evolution happened remarkably quickly in evolutionary terms. Within a few 100,000 years, early humans had developed mental characteristics that allowed them to hunt animals many times their size, to explore hostile environments, and to take risks that would seem insane to any rational calculation. The rapidity of this change suggests that the selective pressure for courage and determination was extraordinarily intense. The development of language played a crucial role in the evolution of the warrior spirit. The ability to communicate complex ideas allowed early humans to share stories of courage, to celebrate acts of bravery, and to create cultural narratives that reinforce the importance of facing danger with determination. These stories served as both entertainment and education, teaching young people the mental attitudes necessary for survival while creating social pressure to live up to heroic ideals. The earliest forms of what we might call literature were probably accounts of successful hunts, dangerous journeys, and survival against overwhelming odds. These stories served multiple functions. They preserved practical knowledge about survival techniques, they provided psychological preparation for similar challenges, and they created cultural heroes whose examples inspired others to acts of courage. The repetition of these stories around campfires created a shared psychology that valued bravery and determination above personal safety. The social organization of early human groups also contributed to the development of warrior psychology. Unlike many animal species where individuals compete primarily for their own survival and reproductive success, early humans developed social structures that required individuals to risk their lives for the benefit of the group. Hunters had to be willing to face dangerous prey to feed their families. Scouts had to venture into unknown territory despite the risk of encountering predators or hostile groups. Warriors had to defend their communities even when the odds of survival were slim. This willingness to sacrifice individual safety for group benefit required a psychological transformation that went beyond simple survival instincts. It required the development of abstract concepts like duty, honor, and loyalty that could override immediate self-preservation impulses. The emergence of these concepts represented a fundamental change in human psychology that distinguished our species from all other animals. The training of young people in warrior psychology began in early childhood and continued throughout their lives. Children were exposed to increasingly challenging situations that tested their courage and determination while providing them with the skills and confidence needed to face greater dangers. This training was not systematic in the modern sense, but it was comprehensive and effective, producing adults who could function effectively in extremely dangerous environments. The initiation rituals practiced by many hunter-gatherer societies served as formal tests of warrior psychology. These ceremonies often involved deliberate exposure to pain, fear, and physical challenges that pushed individuals to their psychological limits. Those who completed these initiations successfully had demonstrated their possession of the mental characteristics necessary for survival and were accepted as full adult members of their communities. The physical component of these initiations was important, but the psychological testing was even more crucial. The ability to endure pain without breaking, to face fear without fleeing, and to maintain determination despite exhaustion were the qualities that separated successful warriors from those who would endanger their groups in critical situations. These tests were not arbitrary cruelty, but practical assessments of psychological fitness for survival in hostile environments. The role of women in developing and maintaining warrior psychology has been systematically underestimated by modern researchers, but archaeological and ethnographic evidence suggests that women played crucial roles in the psychological preparation of their communities for survival challenges. Women were often responsible for the early training of children, for maintaining the cultural narratives that reinforced warrior values, and for providing the psychological support that enabled warriors to function effectively under extreme stress. The unique challenges faced by women in Paleolithic societies required their own form of warrior psychology. Pregnancy and childbirth in environments without medical support required extraordinary courage and determination. The responsibility for protecting children from predators and other dangers demanded constant vigilance and the willingness to fight to the death when necessary. The role of women as gatherers required them to venture into dangerous areas in search of food and materials, often alone or in small groups vulnerable to attack. The psychological characteristics that enabled women to fulfill these roles successfully were no less impressive than those required for hunting and warfare. The ability to maintain focus and determination while dealing with the physical stress of pregnancy, the courage to defend children against overwhelming odds, and the mental toughness required to continue gathering activities despite constant danger all represented forms of warrior psychology adapted to specifically female challenges. The development of spiritual and religious beliefs among early humans was intimately connected with the warrior psychology necessary for survival. Facing death on a regular basis required psychological mechanisms for dealing with mortality, loss, and the apparent meaninglessness of existence in a hostile universe. The earliest religious concepts probably emerged as ways of maintaining psychological stability and motivation in the face of overwhelming existential challenges. The burial practices of early humans provide evidence for sophisticated beliefs about death and the afterlife that served important psychological functions. The careful burial of the dead with tools, ornaments, and food suggests beliefs about continued existence after death that would have provided comfort to the living and reduced the psychological impact of constant mortality. These beliefs also served to reinforce warrior values by suggesting that courage and honor were qualities that transcended death. The development of shamanic practices and altered states of consciousness represented another important component of warrior psychology. The use of natural psychoactive substances, rhythmic music, and other techniques for achieving altered states allowed early humans to access psychological resources that were not available in ordinary consciousness. These practices provided ways of dealing with trauma, fear, and psychological exhaustion that were essential for maintaining mental health in extremely stressful environments. The role of shamans and spiritual leaders in maintaining group morale and psychological resilience was crucial for community survival. These individuals served as psychological counselors, providing support and guidance to community members who were struggling with the mental challenges of Paleolithic life. They also served as repositories of cultural knowledge and wisdom, preserving the psychological techniques and spiritual practices that had proven effective for maintaining mental health and warrior psychology. The development of art and symbolic expression among early humans served important functions in maintaining and transmitting warrior psychology. Cave paintings, carvings, and other forms of artistic expression provided ways of processing traumatic experiences, celebrating successful hunts and battles, and creating shared cultural symbols that reinforced group identity and values. The creation of art required investment of time and resources that would have been justified only by important psychological and social functions. The imagery used in Paleolithic art provides insights into the psychological world of early humans and the mental challenges they faced. Depictions of dangerous animals, hunting scenes, and human figures in various poses suggest preoccupation with themes of survival, danger, and human capability in the face of overwhelming challenges. The creation of these images probably served both as psychological processing of traumatic experiences and as inspiration for future acts of courage. The technical skill required to create Paleolithic art also demonstrates the psychological characteristics of early humans. The patience required to complete complex cave paintings, the precision needed for detailed carvings, and the creativity necessary to develop new artistic techniques all reflect mental capabilities that went far beyond simple survival needs. These activities suggest psychological complexity and emotional depth that enabled early humans to find meaning and beauty even in extremely harsh environments. The social functions of art in early human communities were probably as important as its individual psychological benefits. Artistic activities provided opportunities for group bonding, cultural transmission, and the celebration of shared values and experiences. The creation of art required cooperation, resource sharing, and group decision-making that strengthened social bonds and reinforced the group solidarity necessary for survival. The emergence of music and rhythmic activities among early humans served similar psychological functions to visual art, but with additional benefits for group coordination and emotional regulation. The ability to create and respond to rhythmic patterns appears to be uniquely human and probably evolved as a mechanism for achieving group synchronization and emotional solidarity. Musical activities provided ways of building group cohesion, processing emotions, and maintaining psychological resilience that were essential for community survival. The psychological impact of music on warrior mentality should not be underestimated. The ability to use rhythmic chanting, drumming, and other musical techniques to achieve altered states of consciousness provided early humans with powerful tools for psychological preparation for dangerous activities. These techniques could be used to overcome fear, build courage, and maintain determination in the face of overwhelming odds. The development of dance and other rhythmic physical activities provided additional benefits for warrior psychology. These activities served as physical training that improved coordination, strength, and endurance, while also providing psychological benefits through the release of endorphins and other neurochemicals associated with physical exertion. The group coordination required for complex dances also provided training in the kind of teamwork necessary for successful hunting and warfare. The role of competition in early human societies served important functions in developing and maintaining warrior psychology. Competitive activities provided opportunities for individuals to test their skills, build confidence, and establish their place in social hierarchies without the life-and-death consequences of actual survival challenges. These competitions also served as entertainment and social bonding activities that strengthened group cohesion. The competitive activities practiced by early humans probably included contests of strength, speed, accuracy, and endurance that directly tested the skills necessary for survival. Spear-throwing competitions, running races, wrestling matches, and other athletic events provided ways of identifying the most capable individuals, while also motivating everyone to improve their abilities. These competitions also serve psychological functions by providing opportunities for individuals to demonstrate their worth and gain social recognition. The psychological benefits of competition extended beyond individual motivation to include important social functions. Competitive activities provided ways of resolving conflicts, establishing leadership hierarchies, and maintaining group discipline without resorting to violence that could damage group solidarity. The rules and traditions surrounding competitive activities also served to reinforce cultural values and behavioral norms that were important for group survival. The development of leadership structures within early human groups required psychological characteristics that combined warrior mentality with social intelligence and decision-making ability. Effective leaders had to possess the courage and determination necessary to face dangerous situations while also having the communication skills, emotional intelligence, and strategic thinking ability needed to coordinate group activities and maintain social harmony. The selection and training of leaders represented one of the most important functions of early human societies. Leaders who made poor decisions or failed to maintain group morale could cause the death of entire communities. The psychological pressure on leaders was enormous, requiring mental toughness and emotional resilience that went beyond even the demanding requirements faced by ordinary group members. The responsibilities of leadership in Paleolithic societies were far more demanding than those faced by most modern leaders. Early human leaders had to make life and death decisions on a regular basis, often with incomplete information and under extreme time pressure. They had to maintain group morale and discipline in situations where failure meant death for everyone involved. They had to balance the needs and interests of different group members while maintaining the focus and determination necessary for group survival. The psychological characteristics required for effective leadership in early human societies probably included many of the same qualities valued in modern leaders, but intensified to levels that would seem extreme by contemporary standards. The ability to remain calm under pressure, to make difficult decisions quickly, to inspire others to follow dangerous courses of action, and to maintain personal determination in the face of repeated setbacks were all essential for successful leadership in Paleolithic environments. The development of conflict resolution mechanisms within early human groups served important functions in maintaining the psychological health and social cohesion necessary for survival. The close quarters and high stress of Paleolithic life created numerous opportunities for interpersonal conflict that could escalate to levels that threatened group survival. Effective mechanisms for managing and resolving these conflicts were essential for maintaining the cooperation and trust necessary for successful group activities. The conflict resolution techniques developed by early humans probably included many of the same basic approaches used by modern societies, but adapted to the specific challenges of small group survival in hostile environments. These techniques had to be effective enough to resolve serious disputes while also being efficient enough to be implemented quickly when time was critical for survival activities. The psychological skills required for effective conflict resolution in early human societies were probably more demanding than those required in modern environments. Mediators had to be able to understand and address the underlying psychological and emotional issues that created conflicts while also maintaining their own emotional equilibrium and decision-making ability. They had to be trusted and respected by all parties involved while also being tough enough to enforce their decisions when necessary. The role of ritual and ceremony in maintaining warrior psychology and group cohesion was probably much more important in early human societies than it is in modern communities. Ritual activities provided ways of processing traumatic experiences, reinforcing cultural values, and maintaining psychological resilience that were essential for survival in extremely stressful environments. These activities also served important social functions by providing opportunities for group bonding and cultural transmission. The psychological functions of ritual in early human societies probably included many of the same benefits provided by modern therapeutic and religious practices, but adapted to the specific challenges of Paleolithic life. Ritual activities provided ways of dealing with grief, trauma, fear, and other psychological challenges that were constant features of early human existence. They also provided ways of celebrating successes, reinforcing positive behaviors, and maintaining hope and motivation in the face of overwhelming challenges. The development of oral traditions and storytelling among early humans served crucial functions in maintaining and transmitting warrior psychology across generations. Stories provided ways of preserving and sharing the psychological lessons learned from dangerous experiences, while also providing entertainment and social bonding opportunities. The most important stories were probably those that demonstrated the psychological characteristics necessary for survival and success in dangerous environments. The psychological impact of storytelling on early human communities should not be underestimated. Stories provided ways of preparing individuals mentally for challenges they had not yet faced, while also processing and integrating experiences they had already survived. The repetition of stories about courage, determination, and successful survival created cultural narratives that reinforced the psychological characteristics necessary for community survival. The technical skills required for effective storytelling in early human societies were probably quite sophisticated, requiring memory techniques, dramatic abilities, and psychological insight that enabled storytellers to create maximum impact on their audiences. Effective storytellers had to be able to capture and hold attention, convey complex psychological and practical information, and inspire their listeners to adopt the attitudes and behaviors necessary for survival. The selection and training of storytellers represented another important function of early human societies. These individuals served as living repositories of cultural knowledge and psychological wisdom, preserving the mental tools and emotional strategies that had enabled their communities to survive the most challenging conditions imaginable. The best storytellers possessed not only exceptional memory and dramatic skills, but also deep understanding of human psychology and the specific mental challenges faced by their people. The responsibility of storytellers extended far beyond entertainment to include crucial functions in psychological preparation and mental health maintenance. Through their narratives, they helped community members process traumatic experiences, learn from the mistakes and successes of others, and develop the mental resilience necessary for facing future challenges. The stories they told served as a form of psychological training that prepared listeners for situations they might encounter, while also providing emotional support and meaning during difficult times. The development of individual psychological resilience in early human societies required constant attention and reinforcement throughout each person's lifetime. The mental demands of Paleolithic life were so extreme that even individuals with strong natural psychological characteristics needed ongoing support and training to maintain their effectiveness. This support came through various mechanisms, including social relationships, ritual activities, and personal practices that helped individuals maintain their mental health and warrior psychology. The personal practices developed by early humans for maintaining psychological resilience probably included many techniques that would be recognizable to modern psychologists and mental health practitioners. Meditation, visualization, physical exercise, and other individual activities that promoted mental health and emotional regulation were probably discovered and refined by early humans through trial and error over many generations. These practices provided ways for individuals to manage stress, process emotions, and maintain their psychological equilibrium in extremely challenging environments. The social support systems that evolved in early human communities served crucial functions in maintaining individual and group psychological health. The small size of most Paleolithic groups meant that every individual knew every other individual intimately, creating opportunities for emotional support and psychological assistance that are rare in modern societies. This intimacy also created responsibilities for mutual care and support that helped ensure that psychological problems were identified and addressed before they became serious threats to individual or group survival. The mentorship relationships that developed between experienced and inexperienced community members served important functions in transmitting not only practical skills, but also psychological wisdom and emotional resilience. Older individuals who had survived multiple life-threatening situations possessed invaluable knowledge about mental strategies and emotional techniques that could help younger people develop their own psychological resources. These relationships provided personalized instruction in warrior psychology that was adapted to individual needs and characteristics. The development of personal identity and self-concept in early human societies was profoundly shaped by the constant presence of mortal danger and the need for extraordinary courage and determination. Individuals had to develop a sense of themselves as capable warriors who could face any challenge while also maintaining the flexibility and adaptability necessary for survival in changing conditions. This identity formation process was probably much more intense and demanding than anything experienced by most modern people. The psychological pressure of constantly proving oneself worthy of survival and group membership created selection pressure for individuals who could maintain confidence and self-esteem despite repeated exposure to situations that tested their limits. Those who developed strong sense of personal efficacy and warrior identity were more likely to take the risks necessary for group survival, while also maintaining the psychological resilience needed to recover from setbacks and failures. The role of physical conditioning in developing and maintaining warrior psychology cannot be overlooked. The demanding physical requirements of Paleolithic life served as constant training that built not only physical capabilities, but also mental toughness and psychological resilience. The experience of pushing through physical exhaustion, enduring pain, and maintaining performance under extreme physical stress all contributed to the development of mental characteristics that were essential for survival. The integration of physical and mental training in early human societies probably occurred naturally through daily survival activities rather than through formal exercise programs. Hunting, gathering, traveling, and other necessary activities provided constant opportunities for physical conditioning while also testing and developing psychological characteristics. This integration ensured that physical and mental capabilities developed together in ways that maximized overall effectiveness and survival potential. The psychological adaptation to violence and death was one of the most challenging aspects of developing warrior psychology in early human societies. Unlike modern people, who are largely sheltered from direct exposure to violence and death, early humans encountered these realities on a regular basis. The ability to function effectively despite constant exposure to mortality required psychological mechanisms that protected mental health, while maintaining the emotional sensitivity necessary for social relationships and cultural development. The development of these psychological mechanisms probably required careful balance between emotional protection and emotional engagement. Individuals who became completely numb to violence and death lost the emotional connections that motivated them to protect their families and communities. But individuals who remained too emotionally sensitive to violence and death were overwhelmed by the psychological trauma of Paleolithic life and became ineffective as warriors and community members. The cultural mechanisms that helped early humans maintain this psychological balance probably included ritual practices that provided structured ways of processing violent experiences, social support systems that helped individuals deal with traumatic events, and cultural narratives that provided meaning and context for violence and death. These mechanisms allowed individuals to maintain their psychological health while also developing the mental toughness necessary for survival in violent environments. The development of tactical thinking and strategic planning abilities among early humans required psychological characteristics that combined analytical intelligence with the ability to remain calm and focused under extreme pressure. The complex hunting strategies, defensive preparations, and resource management decisions necessary for survival required mental capabilities that went far beyond simple reaction to immediate threats. These abilities required individuals who could think ahead, anticipate problems, and develop solutions while also maintaining the courage and determination necessary to implement dangerous plans. The training required to develop these tactical and strategic abilities probably began in childhood and continued throughout each individual's lifetime. Young people learned through observation, instruction, and gradually increasing participation in dangerous activities that required strategic thinking. The complexity of these learning processes suggests that early humans possessed educational capabilities that were far more sophisticated than commonly imagined. The psychological pressure of making tactical and strategic decisions that could determine the survival of entire communities required mental characteristics that combined analytical ability with extraordinary courage and determination. Leaders and senior community members who were responsible for these decisions had to maintain their analytical capabilities while also dealing with the emotional stress of knowing that mistakes could result in the deaths of people they cared about. The development of intuitive decision-making abilities represented another crucial component of warrior psychology in early human societies. The fast-paced and unpredictable nature of many survival situations required individuals who could make effective decisions quickly, often with incomplete information and under extreme stress. These decisions had to be based not only on analytical thinking, but also on intuitive understanding of situations that came from experience and psychological sensitivity to environmental cues. The training required to develop reliable intuitive decision-making abilities probably involved extensive exposure to challenging situations under the guidance of experienced mentors who could help learners understand the subtle cues and psychological processes involved in effective intuition. This training required not only practical experience, but also psychological sensitivity and self-awareness that allowed individuals to recognize and trust their intuitive responses. The integration of analytical and intuitive decision-making capabilities represented one of the most sophisticated aspects of warrior psychology in early human societies. Effective warriors had to be able to switch rapidly between careful analytical thinking and rapid intuitive response depending on the requirements of each situation. This flexibility required psychological characteristics that combined intellectual capability with emotional intelligence and self-awareness. The legacy of warrior psychology in early human societies extends far beyond its immediate survival benefits to include fundamental aspects of human nature that continue to influence behavior and culture in modern societies. The psychological characteristics that enabled our ancestors to survive the challenges of Paleolithic life became part of the genetic and cultural inheritance that shapes human behavior today. Understanding these characteristics provides insights into both the capabilities and the limitations of human psychology in contemporary environments. The courage, determination, and resilience that characterize early human warriors continue to appear in modern humans facing extreme challenges, suggesting that these psychological characteristics remain part of our species' inheritance. The social cooperation, leadership abilities, and conflict resolution skills that were essential for survival in early human societies continue to be important for success in modern communities. The creativity, adaptability, and problem-solving abilities that enabled early humans to thrive in hostile environments continue to drive human innovation and achievement. But the warrior psychology that served early humans so well in Paleolithic environments also creates challenges in modern societies, where physical courage and aggressive determination are less important for survival than cooperation, communication, and analytical thinking. Understanding the evolutionary origins of human psychological characteristics can help modern people recognize both the strengths and the limitations of their psychological inheritance, while developing strategies for adapting ancient psychological patterns to contemporary challenges. The study of warrior psychology in early human societies also provides insights into the potential capabilities of human psychology under extreme conditions. The extraordinary achievements of our ancestors in surviving and thriving in hostile environments that would challenge even modern humans equipped with advanced technology demonstrate psychological capabilities that are rarely fully utilized in contemporary societies. Understanding these capabilities can inspire modern humans to develop their own psychological resources more fully, while also providing practical knowledge for dealing with extreme challenges. The transformation of early humans from vulnerable prey animals to dominant predators through the development of warrior psychology represents one of the most remarkable achievements in the history of life on Earth. This transformation required not only technological innovation and social cooperation, but also fundamental changes in human psychology that enabled individuals to function effectively in roles that went against millions of years of evolutionary conditioning. The success of this transformation demonstrates the extraordinary plasticity and adaptability of human psychology when faced with extreme challenges. The warrior spirit that enabled early humans to survive hell on Earth continues to burn within modern humans, waiting to be awakened when circumstances demand extraordinary courage, determination, and resilience. Understanding the origins and characteristics of this warrior psychology provides modern people with access to psychological resources that have been tested and proven effective under the most challenging conditions imaginable. The legacy of the first warriors lives on in every human being who faces adversity with courage, who refuses to surrender in the face of overwhelming odds, and who finds the strength to protect and provide for those they love, regardless of the personal cost. The morning mist clung to the fertile valleys of the Fertile Crescent as Enlil knelt beside the tiny green shoots that had emerged from the earth like miracles. 10,000 years had passed since his ancestors had faced saber-toothed cats with nothing but stone spears and raw courage. Now, instead of hunting mammoth across frozen steppes, he was coaxing grain from the soil, transforming wild grasses into something that could feed hundreds of people from a single plot of land. Yet as he worked, the same intensity burned in his eyes that had driven his forebears to survive hell on earth. The warrior spirit had not disappeared with the Ice Age. It had evolved, transformed, and found new battlefields to conquer. The legacy of humanity's first warriors extends far beyond their immediate survival achievements to encompass virtually every aspect of human civilization that followed. The psychological, social, and technological foundations laid down during the Paleolithic period became the bedrock upon which agriculture, cities, writing, art, science, and all other human achievements were built. Understanding this legacy reveals how the extraordinary capabilities developed for survival in hostile environments became the driving forces behind humanity's domination of the planet. The transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture represents one of the most profound transformations in human history, yet it was made possible only by the capabilities that early humans had developed during their long struggle for survival. The patience required to observe plant growth cycles, the planning ability needed to prepare fields and store seeds, the cooperation necessary to coordinate agricultural activities, and the determination to persist through crop failures and environmental challenges all drew directly from the psychological and social resources that had been developed over hundreds of thousands of years of Paleolithic survival. Archaeological evidence from the earliest agricultural sites reveals that the transition to farming was not a sudden discovery, but a gradual process that extended over thousands of years. Sites in the Middle East, China, and the Americas show evidence of increasingly intensive management of wild plant resources long before the development of true agriculture. This progression suggests that early farmers were applying and extending survival skills that had been refined over millennia of gathering wild plants under challenging conditions. The tools used in early agriculture were direct descendants of the implements developed for Paleolithic plant gathering and processing. Digging sticks evolved into plows. Grinding stones became more sophisticated for processing larger quantities of grain, and storage containers were enlarged and improved to handle agricultural surpluses. The technical knowledge required to manufacture these tools drew directly from the tool-making traditions that had enabled Paleolithic peoples to survive in hostile environments. The social organization required for successful agriculture also built directly upon the cooperative structures that had been essential for Paleolithic survival. Agricultural communities required coordinated labor for field preparation, planting, harvesting, and processing that was far more complex than hunting and gathering activities, but drew upon the same basic human capabilities for cooperation, leadership, and resource sharing. The decision-making processes used to coordinate agricultural activities evolved from the strategic planning systems that had been developed for hunting large game and managing seasonal migrations. The population growth that accompanied the development of agriculture created new challenges that required the same psychological characteristics that had enabled Paleolithic survival. Larger communities meant more complex social relationships, more competition for resources, and more potential for conflict. The management of these challenges required leadership abilities, conflict resolution skills, and social intelligence that had been developed during the long period of small group survival under extreme conditions. The development of permanent settlements represented another major transformation that built upon Paleolithic foundations. The construction techniques used in early villages and cities evolved directly from the shelter-building skills that had been essential for survival in hostile environments. The materials used, the structural principles applied, and the planning processes employed all reflected knowledge and capabilities that had been developed over hundreds of thousands of years of creating temporary and semi-permanent shelters. The defensive considerations that influenced early settlement design also reflected the warrior mentality that had been essential for Paleolithic survival. Early villages and cities were typically located in defensible positions and surrounded by walls or other fortifications that required the same strategic thinking and construction skills that had been used to create hunting traps in defensive positions. The psychological readiness to defend settlements against attacks drew directly from the warrior psychology that had enabled early humans to survive in environments filled with dangerous predators and competing groups. The development of specialized crafts and trades within early agricultural communities represented an extension of the skill specialization that had been important for Paleolithic survival. The tool makers, weapon manufacturers, and other specialists who emerged in early settlements were applying and extending technical knowledge that had been developed over millennia of creating implements for survival. The training systems used to pass specialized knowledge from master to apprentice evolved from the teaching methods that had been essential for transmitting survival skills in Paleolithic societies. The emergence of social hierarchies and leadership structures in early agricultural communities built directly upon the organizational systems that had been developed for coordinating dangerous hunting expeditions and managing group survival under extreme conditions. The qualities valued in early leaders, including courage, decision-making ability, and skill in managing group dynamics, were the same characteristics that had been essential for survival in Paleolithic environments. The methods used to select and train leaders also drew from traditions that had been developed over hundreds of thousands of years of small group survival. The development of long-distance trade networks among early agricultural communities represented an extension of the resource procurement and sharing systems that had been important for Paleolithic survival. The ability to identify valuable resources, to negotiate exchanges with other groups, and to transport materials over long distances all drew upon capabilities that had been developed during the long period of hunter-gatherer survival. The social skills required for successful trading, including communication, negotiation, and trust building, evolved from the diplomatic capabilities that had been essential for managing relationships between competing groups. The technological innovations that characterized early agricultural societies built directly upon the foundation of knowledge and problem-solving capabilities that had been developed during the Paleolithic period. The ability to observe natural processes, to experiment with new techniques, and to develop solutions to complex problems had all been essential for survival in hostile environments. The persistence required to refine new technologies through trial and error drew from the psychological resources that had enabled early humans to survive repeated failures and setbacks. The development of metallurgy represents one of the most spectacular examples of how Paleolithic capabilities were extended and refined in later periods. The observation and experimentation required to discover that certain rocks could be transformed into metal through heating drew upon the same analytical abilities that had enabled early humans to develop stone tool-making techniques. The control of high-temperature fires required for metalworking evolved directly from the fire management skills that had been essential for Paleolithic survival. The social organization required for metal production also reflected Paleolithic foundations. The coordination of mining, fuel gathering, smelting, and manufacturing activities required the same kinds of cooperative planning and resource management that had been essential for successful hunting expeditions. The specialized knowledge required for metalworking was transmitted through the same kinds of master-apprentice relationships that had been used to pass down tool-making skills for hundreds of thousands of years. The weapons and tools produced through metallurgy represented improvements upon designs that had been developed during the Paleolithic period. Metal spear points, knives, and axes used the same basic functional principles as their stone predecessors, but with improved performance characteristics. The understanding of weapon design, balance, and effectiveness that guided metal weapon production drew directly from knowledge that had been accumulated over millennia of creating stone implements for survival and warfare. The development of writing systems represents another major achievement that built upon Paleolithic foundations. The observational skills required to recognize that marks could represent sounds or concepts drew upon the same analytical abilities that had enabled early humans to read animal tracks, weather signs, and other environmental indicators. The memory techniques used to master early writing systems evolved from the oral traditions that had been essential for preserving and transmitting survival knowledge in pre-literate societies. The content of early writing also reflected priorities and concerns that had been shaped by the long period of survival under extreme conditions. Many of the earliest written records deal with resource management, trade agreements, and military activities that drew directly upon knowledge and organizational systems that had been developed during the Paleolithic period. The legal codes and administrative systems recorded in early writing reflected social organization principles that had been essential for group survival under challenging conditions. The development of mathematics and early scientific thinking also built upon intellectual capabilities that had been essential for Paleolithic survival. The ability to count, measure, and calculate had been important for managing resources, planning hunting expeditions, and coordinating group activities. The observational skills required for early astronomy and natural philosophy drew upon the same analytical abilities that had enabled early humans to predict weather patterns, seasonal changes, and animal behavior. The emergence of organized religion and complex spiritual systems represented an extension of the ritual and belief systems that had been important for maintaining psychological resilience and group cohesion during the Paleolithic period. The psychological needs addressed by organized religion, including the management of mortality anxiety, the creation of meaning in the face of suffering, and the reinforcement of social cooperation, were the same needs that had been served by simpler spiritual practices during the long period of survival under extreme conditions. The architectural achievements of early civilizations, including temples, palaces, and monumental construction projects, represented applications of engineering knowledge and organizational capabilities that had been developed during the Paleolithic period. The planning required for major construction projects drew upon the same strategic thinking abilities that had been essential for coordinating complex hunting expeditions. The construction techniques used reflected knowledge of materials, structural principles, and project management that had been accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years of creating shelters and other structures. The military organizations that emerged in early civilizations represented systematizations of the warrior capabilities that had been essential for Paleolithic survival. The training methods used to develop soldiers drew upon teaching systems that had been used to pass down hunting and fighting skills for millennia. The tactical and strategic principles applied in early warfare reflected knowledge that had been accumulated through countless generations of survival conflicts with predators and competing groups. The weapons and defensive technologies developed for organized warfare were refinements of tools and techniques that had been created during the Paleolithic period. The understanding of weapon effectiveness, tactical deployment, and psychological warfare that guided military development drew directly from knowledge that had been essential for survival in hostile environments. The leadership qualities valued in military commanders were the same characteristics that had been important for coordinating dangerous hunting expeditions and defending communities against threats. The artistic achievements of early civilizations also reflected capabilities and sensibilities that had been developed during the Paleolithic period. The technical skills required for sculpture, painting, and decorative arts evolved from the craftsmanship traditions that had been essential for creating tools, weapons, and other survival equipment. The aesthetic sensibilities that guided artistic creation drew upon the same appreciation for form, balance, and symbolic meaning that had been important for creating effective and meaningful objects during the long period of survival under extreme conditions. The social functions served by art in early civilizations also reflected needs that had been important during the Paleolithic period. Art continued to serve functions in group identity formation, cultural transmission, and psychological support that had been essential for maintaining social cohesion and individual resilience under challenging conditions. The patronage systems that supported artistic production evolved from the resource sharing and status recognition systems that had been important for motivating and rewarding valuable contributions to group survival. The educational systems that emerged in early civilizations represented formalizations of the knowledge transmission processes that had been essential for Paleolithic survival. The methods used to train students in specialized skills drew upon teaching traditions that had been used to pass down hunting, tool-making, and other survival capabilities for hundreds of thousands of years. The content of early education, focusing on practical skills, cultural knowledge, and character development, reflected priorities that had been shaped by the long period of survival under extreme conditions. The legal systems and governance structures that developed in early civilizations also built upon organizational principles that had been essential for Paleolithic group survival. The methods used to resolve conflicts, allocate resources, and coordinate group activities drew upon social management techniques that had been refined over millennia of small group survival under challenging conditions. The qualities valued in leaders and judges reflected characteristics that had been important for maintaining group cohesion and making life and death decisions under extreme pressure. The economic systems that emerged with early civilizations represented extensions of the resource management and exchange systems that had been important for Paleolithic survival. The ability to assess value, negotiate exchanges, and manage complex transactions drew upon capabilities that had been essential for acquiring and sharing resources under conditions of scarcity and uncertainty. The organizational structures used to coordinate economic activities evolved from the planning and coordination systems that had been essential for successful hunting and gathering expeditions. The exploration and expansion activities of early civilizations also reflected the same adventurous spirit and risk-taking capabilities that had enabled early humans to spread across the globe during the Paleolithic period. The navigational skills, survival techniques, and social organization required for long-distance exploration drew directly upon knowledge and capabilities that had been essential for survival in unknown and hostile environments. The motivation to explore and settle new territories reflected the same adaptive flexibility that had enabled early humans to survive in diverse and changing environments. The development of philosophy and abstract thinking in early civilizations represented applications of the analytical and creative capabilities that had been essential for solving survival problems during the Paleolithic period. The ability to think systematically about complex problems, to develop general principles from specific observations, and to create new conceptual frameworks drew upon intellectual capabilities that had been refined through hundreds of thousands of years of dealing with life and death challenges. The medical knowledge and healing practices that developed in early civilizations built upon the understanding of human anatomy, medicinal plants, and treatment techniques that had been essential for Paleolithic survival. The observational skills required to identify effective treatments drew upon the same analytical abilities that had enabled early humans to distinguish between beneficial and harmful plants, to understand the effects of different foods and substances, and to develop techniques for treating injuries and illnesses under primitive conditions. The legacy of Paleolithic survival capabilities also appears in the psychological and social characteristics that continue to distinguish human societies from those of other species. The extraordinary cooperation, communication, and problem-solving abilities that characterize human communities reflect capabilities that were originally developed for survival under extreme conditions. The creativity, adaptability, and resilience that enable human societies to thrive in diverse environments draw upon psychological resources that were essential for Paleolithic survival. The competitive and achievement-oriented aspects of human nature that drive technological innovation, artistic creation, and social advancement also reflect the warrior psychology that was essential for survival during the Paleolithic period. The willingness to take risks, to persist through difficulties, and to strive for excellence reflects psychological characteristics that were originally developed for survival in life and death situations. The satisfaction derived from overcoming challenges and achieving difficult goals draws upon the same psychological reward systems that motivated extraordinary efforts during the long period of survival under extreme conditions. The social bonding and loyalty characteristics that enable human communities to function effectively also reflect capabilities that were essential for Paleolithic group survival. The ability to form strong emotional attachments, to cooperate in pursuit of common goals, and to make sacrifices for group benefit draws upon psychological and social resources that were originally developed for survival under conditions where individual survival depended absolutely upon group success. The leadership and followership capabilities that characterize human social organization also reflect structures that were essential for coordinating dangerous survival activities during the Paleolithic period. The ability to recognize and follow effective leaders, to coordinate complex group activities, and to maintain discipline under pressure draws upon social capabilities that were refined through hundreds of thousands of years of survival challenges that required extraordinary coordination and cooperation. Understanding the legacy of humanity's first warriors provides valuable insights into both the capabilities and the challenges of modern human societies. The psychological and social characteristics that enabled our ancestors to survive hell on Earth continue to influence human behavior in contemporary environments. sometimes creating advantages and sometimes creating difficulties. Recognizing the evolutionary origins of human capabilities can help modern people understand their own psychological resources while also identifying areas where ancient adaptations may be poorly suited to contemporary challenges. The extraordinary achievements of early human civilization, from agriculture to writing to monumental architecture, all built upon the foundation of capabilities that were originally developed for survival under the most challenging conditions imaginable. The courage, determination, creativity, and cooperation that enabled our ancestors to transform from vulnerable prey animals into the dominant species on the planet continue to drive human achievement and progress in the modern world. The legacy of the first warriors lives on in every human effort to overcome obstacles, to create something new, or to build a better future for coming generations. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the melting permafrost in northern Alaska, watching as ancient ice released secrets that had been locked away for millennia. The climate monitoring station behind her beeped steadily, recording temperatures that would have been unimaginable to the climate scientists of just a generation ago. As she collected samples from the thawing ground, she thought about the early humans who had once hunted mammoth across these same landscapes. They had faced a world in chaos, where survival depended on adapting to rapid environmental changes, working together against overwhelming odds, and finding innovative solutions to problems that threatened their very existence. Now, as she contemplated the data showing accelerating climate change, she realized that humanity once again faced challenges that would require the same courage, cooperation, and ingenuity that had carried our species through its darkest hours. The lessons learned from humanity's first warriors are not merely historical curiosities or inspirational stories from a distant past. They represent a blueprint for survival and success that remains as relevant today as it was 2 million years ago. In an era when humanity faces global challenges of unprecedented complexity and scale, the psychological, social, and technological strategies that enabled our ancestors to survive hell on Earth offer crucial insights for navigating the difficulties of the modern world. The first and perhaps most important lesson from our Paleolithic ancestors concerns the power of human cooperation and social organization. Early humans survived not because they were individually superior to other species, but because they developed unprecedented abilities to work together in pursuit of common goals. The coordination required for mammoth hunts, the resource sharing that enabled groups to survive lean periods, and the knowledge transmission systems that preserved crucial survival information all depended on social cooperation that went far beyond anything seen in other species. Modern humanity faces challenges that are global in scope and require levels of cooperation that exceed even those achieved by early human societies. Climate change, pandemic diseases, resource depletion, and technological risks all demand coordinated responses that span national boundaries, cultural differences, and competing interests. The example of Paleolithic cooperation suggests that humans possess the inherent capabilities needed for such coordination, but realizing this potential requires the same commitment to group survival over individual advantage that characterized successful early human societies. The mechanisms that enabled effective cooperation among early humans offer specific guidance for modern cooperation challenges. The development of shared cultural narratives that reinforced group identity and common purpose, the creation of leadership structures that balanced authority with accountability, and the establishment of resource-sharing systems that ensured individual welfare was linked to group success all provide models that can be adapted to contemporary circumstances. The second crucial lesson from humanity's first warriors concerns the importance of adaptability and innovation in the face of changing conditions. Early humans survived the dramatic climate fluctuations of the Pleistocene epoch, not by rigidly adhering to established patterns, but by continuously adapting their strategies, technologies, and social organizations to meet new challenges. The ability to observe changing conditions, to experiment with new approaches, and to abandon unsuccessful strategies in favor of more effective alternatives was essential for survival in rapidly changing environments. Modern humanity lives in an era of accelerating change that rivals the environmental instability of the Pleistocene period. Technological innovation, social transformation, and environmental change are occurring at rates that challenge traditional institutions and established ways of life. The example of early human adaptability suggests that the capacity for continuous innovation and flexibility remains one of humanity's greatest strengths. But realizing this potential requires the same willingness to embrace change and uncertainty that characterize successful Paleolithic societies. The specific strategies that enabled early human adaptation also offer guidance for modern innovation challenges. The systematic observation and experimentation that led to technological breakthroughs, the preservation and transmission of successful innovations through cultural learning systems, and the willingness to take calculated risks in pursuit of improved solutions all provide models for addressing contemporary adaptation challenges. The third essential lesson from our ancestral warriors concerns the psychological characteristics required for facing overwhelming challenges with courage and determination. Early humans survived in environments that would terrify most modern people, not because they lacked fear, but because they developed mental strategies for functioning effectively despite fear. The warrior psychology that enabled hunters to face saber-toothed cats, explorers to venture into unknown territories, and communities to persist through disasters provides a template for the mental resilience needed to address modern challenges. The psychological demands of contemporary life, while different from those faced by Paleolithic peoples, can be equally overwhelming. Economic uncertainty, social instability, environmental threats, and technological disruption create stress levels that challenge individual and collective mental health. The example of early human psychological resilience suggests that humans possess inherent capabilities for managing extreme stress and maintaining effectiveness under pressure. But developing these capabilities requires the same kind of mental training and social support that characterize successful Paleolithic societies. The specific psychological strategies that enabled early human resilience also offer practical guidance for modern stress management. The development of meaning-making systems that provided context and purpose for difficult experiences, the creation of social support networks that provided emotional resources during challenging periods, and the cultivation of mental toughness through graduated exposure to manageable challenges all provide approaches that can be adapted to contemporary circumstances. The fourth vital lesson from humanity's first warriors concerns the importance of long-term thinking and strategic planning in achieving sustainable success. Early humans survived not by focusing exclusively on immediate needs, but by developing the ability to plan ahead, to invest current resources in future capabilities, and to make short-term sacrifices for long-term benefits. The seasonal planning that enabled groups to survive harsh winters, the tool preparation that anticipated future hunting needs, and the knowledge preservation that ensured cultural continuity all required planning horizons that extended far beyond immediate survival needs. Modern humanity faces challenges that require even longer planning horizons than those used by early human societies. Climate change mitigation, sustainable development, and technological risk management all require coordinated actions over decades or centuries to achieve desired outcomes. The example of early human strategic thinking suggests that humans possess the cognitive capabilities needed for such long-term planning. But realizing this potential requires overcoming the short-term focus that characterizes many modern institutions in decision-making processes. The specific planning strategies that enabled early human success also offer guidance for modern strategic challenges. The integration of multiple time horizons in decision-making processes, the development of contingency plans that accounted for various possible scenarios, and the creation of resource reserve systems that provided buffers against unexpected challenges all provide approaches that can be adapted to contemporary planning needs. The fifth critical lesson from our ancestral warriors concerns the importance of preserving and transmitting knowledge across generations. Early humans survived by developing sophisticated systems for capturing, preserving, and sharing the hard-won knowledge that enabled survival in hostile environments. The oral traditions that preserved technical knowledge, the teaching systems that pass skills from experienced to inexperienced individuals, and the cultural practices that reinforced important survival lessons all contributed to the accumulation of knowledge that enabled increasingly sophisticated responses to survival challenges. Modern humanity possesses unprecedented capabilities for knowledge preservation and transmission, yet many contemporary societies struggle with knowledge fragmentation, information overload, and the loss of practical wisdom. The example of early human knowledge systems suggests that effective knowledge management requires not just technological capabilities, but also cultural practices that prioritize learning, teaching, and the preservation of valuable insights across generations. The specific knowledge management strategies that enabled early human success also offer guidance for modern information challenges. The integration of theoretical knowledge with practical experience, the development of teaching relationships that provided personalized instruction and mentorship, and the creation of cultural practices that reinforce the value of learning and knowledge sharing all provide approaches that can enhance contemporary knowledge systems. The sixth essential lesson from humanity's first warriors concerns the importance of maintaining physical and mental health as foundations for individual and collective effectiveness. Early humans survived by developing comprehensive approaches to health that integrated physical conditioning, mental resilience, nutritional knowledge, and social support systems. The recognition that individual health was essential for group survival, combined with practical knowledge about maintaining health under challenging conditions, enabled early human societies to function effectively despite exposure to numerous health threats. Modern humanity faces health challenges that are both similar to and different from those encountered by early human societies. While infectious diseases, injuries, and nutritional deficiencies remain important concerns, contemporary health challenges also include lifestyle-related diseases, environmental toxins, and mental health problems associated with modern living conditions. The example of early human health strategies suggests that comprehensive approaches that integrate physical, mental, and social health considerations remain essential for individual and collective well-being. The specific health maintenance strategies that enabled early human success also offer guidance for modern health challenges. The emphasis on physical activity as an integral part of daily life, the use of natural foods and medicinal plants for nutrition and healing, and the creation of social support systems that promoted both individual and collective health all provide approaches that can enhance contemporary health and wellness efforts. The seventh crucial lesson from our ancestral warriors concerns the relationship between individual development and collective success. Early humans survived by creating social systems that enabled each individual to develop their unique capabilities while also contributing to group welfare. The specialization that allowed individuals to become expert tool makers, hunters, or healers, combined with cooperation systems that ensured individual expertise, benefited the entire group, created societies that were both individually fulfilling and collectively effective. Modern humanity faces the challenge of balancing individual fulfillment with collective responsibility in societies that are far larger and more complex than early human groups. The example of early human social organizations suggests that this balance is achievable, but requires social institutions that support individual development, while also channeling individual capabilities toward collective goals. The specific social organization strategies that enabled early human success also offer guidance for modern community development challenges. The creation of role specialization systems that matched individual capabilities with group needs, the development of recognition and reward systems that motivated individual excellence while reinforcing group loyalty, and the establishment of decision-making processes that balanced individual autonomy with collective coordination all provide approaches that can enhance contemporary social organization. The legacy of humanity's first warriors also provides perspective on the challenges and opportunities facing modern civilization. The extraordinary achievements of contemporary human societies, from space exploration to global communication networks to medical advances that would seem miraculous to our ancestors, all build upon the foundation of capabilities that were originally developed for survival under the most challenging conditions imaginable. Understanding this legacy can provide both humility about human limitations and confidence in human potential. The challenges facing modern humanity, while unprecedented in their scale and complexity, are not fundamentally different from the survival challenges that our ancestors faced and overcame. Climate change, resource scarcity, social conflict, and technological risks all require the same basic human capabilities that enabled survival during the Paleolithic period. The ability to observe and understand complex systems, to develop innovative solutions to difficult problems, to cooperate effectively in pursuit of common goals, and to persist through setbacks and failures until successful approaches are found. The psychological and social resources that enabled our ancestors to transform from vulnerable prey animals into the dominant species on the planet remain available to modern humans. The courage that enabled early hunters to face mammoth and saber-toothed cats can be channeled toward addressing climate change and social injustice. The determination that enabled early humans to persist through ice ages and droughts can be applied to developing sustainable technologies and building resilient communities. The cooperation that enabled small groups to coordinate complex hunting expeditions can be scaled up to address global challenges that require unprecedented levels of international coordination. The technological capabilities available to modern humans far exceed anything imagined by our ancestors, but the fundamental human qualities that determine whether these capabilities are used wisely remain unchanged. The wisdom to distinguish between beneficial and harmful innovations, the courage to pursue difficult but necessary changes, the persistence to continue working toward long-term goals despite short-term setbacks, and the compassion to ensure that progress benefits all members of human society all depend on the same psychological and social characteristics that enabled Paleolithic survival. The future of humanity will be determined not primarily by technological capabilities or resource availability, but by the same factors that determine the survival of early human societies. The wisdom to understand complex challenges, the creativity to develop effective solutions, the cooperation to implement coordinated responses, and the determination to persist until success is achieved. The first warriors faced their hell on earth and emerged victorious. Their descendants faced new challenges that require the same extraordinary human qualities that carried our species through its darkest hours. The warrior spirit that enabled humanity's survival during the Paleolithic period burns as brightly today as it did 2 million years ago. It appears in every scientist working to understand climate change, every activist fighting for social justice, every entrepreneur developing sustainable technologies, every parent raising children to be responsible global citizens, and every individual who chooses courage over comfort, cooperation over competition, and hope over despair. The legacy of the first warriors lives on in everyone who faces the challenges of the modern world with the same determination, creativity, and indomitable spirit that carried our species from the edge of extinction to dominance of the planet. The story of humanity's first warriors is ultimately the story of human potential itself. It demonstrates that when faced with impossible odds, humans can develop capabilities that seem to transcend the normal limits of biology and psychology. It shows that cooperation, innovation, and determination can overcome challenges that appear insurmountable. Most importantly, it proves that the human spirit, when properly directed and supported, is capable of achieving transformations that seem miraculous. As we face the challenges of the 21st century and beyond, we carry within us the genetic, psychological, and cultural inheritance of those who survived hell on earth and built the foundation for everything that followed. Their courage is our courage. Their determination is our determination. Their legacy is our inheritance and our responsibility. The first warriors showed us what humans can achieve when they refuse to surrender to overwhelming odds. Now it is our turn to honor their legacy by applying the same extraordinary capabilities to the challenges of our own time.